Hi. Thank you for attending today's reading. Let's begin. I defeated my elementary school bully with a roll of duct tape, just so you know. This story is filled with details that are important later. So instead of pointing out which ones they are, I've decided not to do that. Instead, I trust that you'll know which details those are. Anyways, this story takes place in elementary school during my 6th grade year, where I shared an art class with a kid who was known to be a bully, particularly to me. And by the time I was in 6th grade, everyone at school knew this bully, let's call him Lenny, was a bad kid, and the teachers were catching on to his bullying. I should also add that around this time is when I discovered religion. So one day during art class, we were all sitting at 2 tables. Well, technically there's 4, but they'd been smushed together to make 2. And I can't remember what we were working on, but it did involve tin foil and duct tape. So Lenny and I were sitting across from each other at one table while the rest of the class was working on the other table. Eventually I got to the point in my project that I needed the tape. But the only roll at the table was being used by Lenny. And when I approached him to ask him if I could use it, he started using it in order to ensure that I wouldn't get it. So to avoid a confrontation, I decided to look for one at the other table. Sure enough, I found one that wasn't being used by anyone. And since I knew it was school property and therefore available to any student that needed to use it, I decided to take it and headed back to my table to continue working. Some time passed, and I had set the tape down on the table during my work, when suddenly out of the corner of my eye I see Lenny reaching over the table to grab my duct tape. Knowing that Lenny wouldn't give up the duct tape again and that I would have to go searching for another roll all over again, I quickly grabbed the tape and tried to pull it out of his reach. But by the time I tried that, he already had his hand on it. He then pulled at the tape, and me, so hard that the tables we were sitting at collapsed in on each other due to him yanking me in his direction. Immediately we started yelling at each other to let go of the tape. At which point the teacher came over and decided to break us up. We continued to shout at each other. At which point I yelled something along the lines of, "If you don't stop this kind of behavior, you're bound to go to hell." Something I immediately regretted saying, as it deterred the teacher from taking my side. So after a light scolding, the teacher took the duct tape away, giving us both only a few strips to work with. Naturally I was upset that he was winning again. And at one point I was tearing some tin foil but covering up my face so I didn't have to look at Lenny. To which Lenny said, "Hiding your ugly face." Which made me more mad. And later he decided to start making faces at me. At this point I finally snapped and told the teacher that he was making faces at me. To which he said, "I'm not even making faces at you." Which I shouted back at him in a mocking tone, "I'm not even making faces at you." And then proceeded to make my way to the corner of the room and began sobbing quietly. After a few seconds, the teacher came over to me. And I can't remember exactly what she said, but it caused me to yell, "He bugs me for no reason. I hate Lenny," causing my quiet sobs to evolve into loud crying. "Well, that's too bad. I hate you too," Lenny replied. At that point, the teacher had had enough and decided to keep us both after class. After the class ended, the teacher asked us to explain what happened. And when it was Lenny's turn to explain his side of the story, he tried twisting the truth to make it seem like I was the bad guy, claiming that I had stolen the duct tape from a fellow classmate, who apparently was in the bathroom when I took her tape and also apparently came back to our table to reclaim it. I was so involved in my work at the point that the latter detail took place that I had no idea if what Lenny was saying actually happened. Of course, this not being our first confrontation, I had caught wind of his tactics of twisting the truth and decided to pick apart the details of his argument when my turn came to retell the story. Both of our dads eventually walked in to hear about what was going on. Almost like I was a lawyer picking apart a witness testimony. Eventually, my strategy worked, and the teacher decided to let me off the hook and punished Lenny for what he did to me. And that was how I won a confrontation against my elementary school bully. End of story. Next story. I need opinions on my college essay. Here it is. I woke up in the living room with zero recollection of what happened to me. My mom was freaking out next to me while they put me on a stretcher and pulled me out the front door. I heard my aunt run over to my mom and pull her aside so they could put me in the ambulance. I just cried. I had no idea what was happening to me or why they were taking me. But I did remember who the president was. A random question to be asked. They explained to me that I had just suffered a brain injury from a seizure and I needed testing. 2 months later, you was diagnosed with epilepsy. Completely unexpected. After months of emotions, doctor's appointments, and new meds, I was drained. Every 4 weeks I went to New York City with my mom or dad and we met up with my doctor to check levels, have an EEG, and then take my 2-hour ride home. In December of 2020 I received a call from my doctor saying that I needed to come down to NYU Langone Hospital for a week of testing. I was resentful, to be honest, but I knew it wasn't him asking. He was forcing me. I cried every night in my mom's arms at the hospital. I felt like I was being tortured. No meds to help me. IV in my arm. And probes on my head. I was in constant pain. 1 week after my tests I was packing to leave when my doctor walked in and shut the door. My mind immediately assumed the worst. "There's no hope for you, Sierra," was all I could anticipate. He sat down next to my bed and told me I had epilepsy that had affected my whole brain and there was no cure. Little did I know what he said next would change the way I saw my disease forever. "Would you like to help us find a cure?" My mom looked at me and said, "You should, Sierra. You never give up and you shouldn't now." To this day I participate in a study where they monitor me and check in on me every day through a Fitbit watch that tracks my sleep, heart rate, and steps. They also do monthly checkups with me. I realized through this study that I'm not alone. This disease affects millions of people. I was letting it take over my life. Instead of trying to conquer it, I made it a point from the moment I started participating in studies that I would never give up. No matter what life throws at me. Giving up would just be letting the hard times win, and I was never going to let that happen. Finding out that I had epilepsy when I was 16 was incredibly uncommon. Most people would find out when they were born or until the age of 5. So the fact that I found out 1 week before my 16th birthday was remarkable to my doctors and family. I didn't have to go through my whole life growing up in doctors, and though now I struggle with this issue, I know that God has my back the entire time and that life can only go up from here. I truly believe that everyone can learn from the hurt. Whether it be a sickness, or family issues, or even something as simple as a broken bone. My goal is to get past my disease and help other people, because I know I may never have a cure, but I could be helping future kids who are struggling a lot worse than I am. End of story. That is all for today. If you want to support my automated channel, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.